Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Office of Consumer Credit Commissioner's stakeholder meeting to discuss the rule review for property tax lenders. My name is Matt Nance, and I'm the OCCC's Deputy General Counsel. I'm joined by several members of the OCCC staff, including Commissioner Leslie Pettyjohn, Director of Licensing and Finance Moran Diamond, Supervising Examiner Carl Hubenthal, Assistant General Counsel Audrey Spalding, and Senior Paralegal Ginger Harmon, who's acting as our meeting organizer. We're holding this meeting through an online webinar, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. Getting input from stakeholders is a really important part of the rulemaking process, and these meetings help us make sure we produce the best rules possible. Our webinar platform is GoToWebinar. Some of you might be listening on your phones, some may be watching on your computers, and some may be doing both. For those of you watching on your computer, there's a window where you can submit questions. If you have a technical question about using the webinar, you can type them in there and Ginger will try to answer those. We're discussing a pre-comment draft of rule amendments that's available on the OCCC's webpage for recent and upcoming rules. On that webpage, you can see the draft rules by clicking on the link for Property Tax Lender Rule Review. If you have any comments on the rule amendments, go ahead and type those in at any time and I'll be getting to those. And if you're on a computer with a mic, there's a function allowing you to raise your hand, and then we can let you make a comment verbally. We're talking about rule amendments that come out of a process called rule review. The Texas Government Code requires state agencies to review their rules every 4 years to make sure they should still exist and to make any necessary updates. And when we do that, we try to get input from stakeholders on whether the rules should be updated. The rules governing property tax lenders and Title VII, Chapter 89 of the Texas Administrative Code are currently up for review. So I'd first like to summarize these rule amendments and then lay out the proposed timeline for the rules, and then you'll have a chance to provide comments. There are 3 different sections with proposed rule changes coming out of this rule review. In section 89.310, we're proposing adjusting the volume-based portion of the annual license fee from 3 cents to 5 cents per $1,000 advanced. Because the OCCC is a self-directed semi-independent agency, we have to make sure that the revenues for each regulated industry are sufficient to recover the costs of regulating that industry. And in looking at the property tax lending industry, we found that we put significant staff time into examining property tax lenders due to the complexity of the transaction. We've also gotten a number of complaints, and many of these complaints are complex and require a lot of staff time to process. The increase to 5 cents would bring property tax lenders in line with regulated lenders making loans under Chapter 342, Subchapter E of the Finance Code, and help ensure that property tax lenders are paying a fair share for the cost of administering Chapter 351 of the Finance Code. So that's the adjustment to the license fee. In section 89.405, the changes relate to our review of a license applicant's criminal history. The amendments include technical corrections and updates to citations based on some legislation from 2019. We're also proposing to repeal section 89.409. This section deals with reissuance of a paper license certificate and is no longer necessary with the OCCC's online licensing system. One issue that's not addressed in this pre-comment draft is below market rate loans under section 3206A-8(1) of the Texas Tax Code. We put out a request for stakeholder input on that issue in May, but we got some mixed feedback on it, including 2 stakeholders saying that rules on that issue aren't necessary. We're still interested in getting input on that issue, but we don't believe we currently have a sufficient legal or factual basis for rules at this time, at least not for the rules that a portion of stakeholders had recommended. Here's a proposed timeline for the rules. You can see that we're requesting informal pre-comments by July 28th. We intend to propose the amendments at the Finance Commission's August 20th meeting. There will be an official comment period during the month of September. We'd present the rules for adoption at the Finance Commission's October meeting, and the rules would be effective in early November. This, of course, is a tentative timeline and is subject to the Finance Commission's approval of the rules for proposal and adoption. So with that, I've summarized the rule action, and I will open things up to comments on the rule amendments. Again, there are two ways to provide your feedback through this webinar. First, you can type your comment out and send it to us through the webinar's question feature, or if you're on a computer with a mic, there should be a function allowing you to raise your hand. So Ginger, do we have any written questions or comments through the webinar? Okay, I'm showing no questions or hands raised at this time. I want to wait for a moment to make sure everyone has a chance in case they'd like to raise their hand. If you have a longer question or comment to type out in the chat box, you can go ahead and type a shorter message if you'd like, saying you have a question, a longer question to type out. Okay, I'm showing we have a hand raised. So I'm standing by for Ginger to unmute the person. Okay, we have a hand raised from Matt Longhofer. Ginger, can we unmute Mr. Longhofer?
I think I'm unmuted now.
Okay, I can hear you.
Hear me okay? Good.
Yep.
Thanks, Matt, for taking my question. And it's specific to the below market rate loans. You know, I've read your feedback that at this time you decided not to do anything, or there wasn't enough information. What I would like to just add are a couple of points. One, the tax code specifically states that the OCCC or the Finance Commission will adopt rules related to that section of the tax code in defining below market rate loans. So I think that's well within your purview to request rules related to that section. What I'd also like to comment on is that while you may have received some mixed feedback, the feedback that you got from the TPTLA represents 11 member companies. We probably do 80% of the transactions and volume in the industry in the TPTLA companies, and we were consistent in our message, and basically we agreed as a group that this is how we wanted to approach it and that rules were necessary. So while you might have had one or two mixed messages, I think if you look at the volume of the business and who's doing the volume of the business and the companies that are part of the TPTLA, I think it means a little bit more than one or two that gave you other information. The last thing I would like to say is, by not having rules in place that clearly define what are below market rate loans, you are putting some companies at a disadvantage and really consumers at a disadvantage, because my company might interpret that a loan that may or may not be below market. So because it's unclear, we have to put a different risk profile against it, which might mean higher fees or higher rate to adjust for that risk. And that ultimately gets passed down to the consumer. And so when you have fewer companies that are able to do these loans because they have chosen to be more conservative, it ultimately makes it less competitive to the consumer. So the TPTLA advocates for clear rules to level the playing field, to ensure that consumers get the greatest access to credit. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you for that comment. I do appreciate the feedback on these rules, and our being able to gather information about this, I think, is a good thing. I do appreciate the feedback that TPTLA has provided, and that helped us get a handle on some of the features of what these below market rate loans look like in practice. And I'm interested in continuing to get feedback on that. It was my understanding of the TPTLA proposal that there were kind of two features to that proposal. And I can just let you know right now, kind of our initial thinking about that. If you'd like to provide some further input to address what I'm about to say, I'd be happy to listen to that. And if you want to provide that input now or in a written pre-comment, I'd be happy to listen to that. But so my understanding of TPTLA's proposal was it had two main components. One was that the kind of benchmark rate that would serve for defining below market rate was the IRS applicable funds rate. That was number one. And number two was that the term government program would be interpreted to exclude federal government programs. And as to the first point, when we looked at that IRS rate, it was kind of our understanding that that is a very low rate designed for tax purposes, and we weren't sure if that really reflects the market rate for a typical loan. So a part of our concern was that that is a low rate, and setting that as the benchmark might exclude some things that would normally be considered below market rate. That was one concern. And then the second concern was interpreting a government program to exclude federal governmental programs. We weren't sure if that exclusion was warranted by the language of the statute, given that there seem to be federal governmental programs that might be described by 3206A-8. So those were our two main responses looking at TPTLA's proposal, in addition to looking at the other stakeholder comments suggesting that this that rules aren't really necessary, and that those stakeholders believed that the statutory text was sufficient. Those were our kind of concerns or thoughts looking at the proposal and thinking about how it would be implemented in practice. Again, I'm happy to hear additional input responding to those. And it may be that there's some sort of future guidance. It might be like an advisory bulletin or something on that issue. But as far as this particular rule action that we intend to present for proposal to the Finance Commission in August, we have not included that.
Okay. Yeah, I think we'll respond with a written response. The one thing I guess I would like to add was that some of us were around when this was added to the tax bill through the, it was the Corona bill that changed 3206 to include this. And the spirit of why it was added was focused on local grant loans, municipal grant loans, low income housing loans done at the county or city level. So it was very much a localized, we'll say, initiative to include this language in the bill, and that was the spirit of why it was added. The fact that it was written very general makes it a bit of a challenge in the statute, and with what's happened since this bill was put in place with all the SBA loans, it's created an issue. So we'd like to get it clarified. We will respond to you through the TPTLA, but as someone in the business, we do see loans, that opportunities that come across our company that we are unsure of, and we continue to be unsure of. There's others, such as grant loans, that are very defined. It's very clear based on the statute that those belong into that category, and but others not so much.
Okay, well, we will look forward to getting more information in those pre-comments. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm not showing any other questions or hands raised at this time. Again, if you have a longer question you want to type out, you can go ahead and send a quick message saying you have a longer message, or feel free to raise your hand. Oh, we have a hand raised from Peter Squire. Ginger, could you unmute Mr. Squire?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Great. Well, first, Mr. Nance, thank you so much for involving us in this feedback session. We definitely appreciate that. And, you know, in general, the items that are on the rule review seem reasonable. I did have one question on the annual renewal and assessment fees. So, and it may just be, you know, I haven't looked at this in a while, but it's the subsection 3 says the maximum annual assessment fee for each licensed entity shall not average more than $1,200 per active licensed location. Is that $1,200? It says average. Is that a cap? And so this raise from 3 cents to 1,000 to 5, is that going to be subject to the cap, or is that an unlimited, you know, volume-based fee?
It's my understanding, and maybe Morand can help me out if there's information to supplement this. But yeah, that is a cap, and effectively you are looking at paying a maximum of $1,200 if you have one license, or a maximum of $1,200 per license if you have more than one license. If effectively, it's my understanding that there's because this annual fee consists of two components, a fixed component and a volume-based component, that you have the $600 fixed component. This $1,200 maximum effectively caps the volume-based component at $600. So Moran, did I get that right? Do you have anything else to add?
You did. I don't have anything to add. That's right.
Okay.
All right, so thank you for clarifying that. And just to reiterate what Mr. Longhofer said, I know that, you know, my view of this is that the OCCC does have the standing to be able to clarify this language. I believe even the commissioner stated she was in the room when this was being negotiated, and there was never any mention of federal programs affecting this. And, you know, in the extreme risk to the industry would be, well, any SBA-backed loan has an effect of, you know, or any agency paper has the effect of reducing the market rate on that loan, and or then by virtue of having the government backing it, the federal government backing it, becomes a below market rate loan. And that would, you know, I think the unintended consequence of that would be that, you know, any mortgage that's recently been done would be an ineligible situation for a property tax lender. So we do think it just is a proper thing to try and tie down. I'm disappointed to see that it wasn't included here. I think I understand why, but we'll take it up and try and get you some more feedback soon. And if there's anything else that we can do to help you, you know, get some clarity about what we're looking for or how you might approach it, you know, please don't be shy to ask.
Yeah, one other thing I'd be interested in, and like I said, I appreciate TPTLA's previous input on this issue that helped us kind of understand mechanically how some of these loans work. But, you know, I'm looking at the text of 3206A-8, and I'm trying to apply the text as written by the legislature, because that's, you know, the text that we have been authorized and directed to enforce. And so one question I had about these SBA loans, one of 3206A-8 talks about the loans financing the property and about the property being subject to the covenants of the loan. So when you provide your comments, that's another issue I'm interested in exploring is under what circumstances are the covenants of the property, or under what circumstances is the property subject to the covenants of the loan? That's something I would be interested in getting some more information about.
That one, I'll just chime in here. That one will be, that's so generic that it's really hard to know, you know, without seeing the exact language of the covenants or the loan. But we do, you know, we do have to go through that process to look at it. But it's, you know, it's just, that's part of why we're seeking some clarity, because this is so open that it's difficult to interpret. But we'll, you know, do you have any other code or things that you look at and to help you decide how to interpret language like that? Is there something else we should be looking at if we responded, you know, along those lines that would be more helpful?
Yeah, I think we're mainly just trying to apply the plain language of the statute. Another good thing to know if you want to argue that there should be a benchmark for deciding what the market rate is. And if you're arguing that there should be a set benchmark for that, it would be good to know, okay, who issues that rate? What's the basis for it? Why is that a good benchmark to reflect the market rate? And if that's adopted as the benchmark, would that actually capture programs billed as below market rate? So for example, I think 0% is kind of obvious. But we have, you know, if someone is offering 2% loans and advertising that as being below market rate, is that, you know, are we adopting a definition that would capture that, for example? So those are the sorts of questions we'd be looking at in trying to, if we were going to proceed with a rule on that issue.
Thank you, Matt. That's helpful.
Okay, I see Mr. Longhofer has raised his hand again. So Ginger, can you go ahead and unmute Mr. Longhofer?
Hello, Matt. You can hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I don't want to belabor the point, but I do believe establishing a benchmark is a challenge, especially, you know, in the environment we're in now when interest rates are very, very low and people can buy down rates, and, you know, what's a 3% face rate maybe bought down, and now they have a 2% loan that they paid for to get that rate. So really it's not below market, but nevertheless, I did want to answer your question on loan covenants. And in my experience is that just about every type of lien, loan, mortgage on a property has some type of covenants in it. As we begin to look at these grant type loans, there are often specific covenants contained either in the note or the deed of trust that requires different elements or different things to be performed to get this grant or get this forgiveness. For example, some of these forgiveness loans, which we really are, which we feel like should be part of the statute and should be excluded from TLTs, will have language that requires they live in the property for 5 years, or it will require they maintain it as their primary residence, or it will require they don't sell it for a certain number of years. So there's those types of covenants are what we see in the grant type loans, where there is some forgivable portion of the debt and the original intent of this, inclusion of the language in the bill. So that's a good example. We can definitely try to pull some more of those together. I think we provided one or two of those in our response, but that would be a good example of a covenant that says you must live in this property for 5 years, and then if you do, this portion of the debt is forgiven.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. Okay, do we have any other attendees with any written comments or verbal comments through a hand raise? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Just to make sure everyone has a chance, I'll go ahead and wait 1 minute to see if we get any other hands raised or written comments. Okay, I'm not showing any other hands raised or written questions, so I will go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank everyone for joining us and participating. Rule updates are available on the OCCC's website as always, and we will be posting the audio of this meeting as well. We are accepting written pre-comments on these rules until 5 p.m. next Wednesday, July 28th. Please email those to me at rule.comments@occc.texas.gov, which is our email address for rule comments. Thank you all for attending. Please be safe out there, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.